Hello everyone and welcome back to Tech with Enke. In today's video, I'm going to propose a solution to the exercise working 9 to 5 from CS50 Python. I'm going to show you one way you can do this, and my aim is just to provide you with a few hints or ideas that you could use when doing this exercise by yourself. So that said, let's look at the exercise and see what's expected from us. I'm going to start by scrolling through this video, and when we look at this, it says that most countries use a 24-hour clock. The US tends rather to use a 12-hour clock, and so instead of a 9 to 17, many Americans will say they work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. like this, or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in either of these formats, wherein AM is an abbreviation for ante-meridian and PM an abbreviation for post-meridian, wherein meridian means midday, that is noon. And if we take a look at this conversion table, we see that 12 a.m. in a 12-hour format will be 00 in the 24-hour format, and so will 12:01 through 12:59 be 0:01 through 0:59 respectively. So if we look at this table, we see that in the 12-hour format compared to a 24-hour format, 12 a.m. is 0 o'clock, 1 a.m. 1 o'clock here, the same thing, 2 a.m. is 2, 3 a.m. 3, and so forth. But the difference occurs here after 12 p.m. because in the 24-hour format, or rather in the 12-hour format, we have 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. But in the 24-hour format, we'll have 13, 14, and 15. But what you need to note here is pretty easy, that after 12, all you need to do to get the hour in the 24-hour format is to add 12 to the current value in the 12-hour format. So looking at this, you see that 13 is basically 1 plus 12, 14 here is 2 plus 12, 15 here is 3 plus 12. And so after 12 p.m., all you need to do to get the hour or the time in the 24-hour format is to add 12 to the respective time in the 12-hour format. So 1 p.m. will be 1 plus 12, that's 13, and 5 p.m. will be 5 plus 12, that's 17. So I think this much is clear. And after that, in a file called working.py, we're expected to implement a function called convert that expects a stir in any of the 12-hour formats below and returns the corresponding stir in a 24-hour format. And expect that AM and PM will be capitalized, no periods therein, and that there will be space before each. Assume that these times are representative of actual times and not necessarily 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. specifically. So these are samples of valid time formats: 9:00 a.m. to 5:00 p.m., 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. without the zeros, 9 a.m. with a 0 here and 5 p.m. without a 0, or 9 here without the zeros and 5 with the zeros, a.m. and p.m. all in uppercase. Also, we are expected to raise a value error if the input to convert is not in either of these formats, or if either time is invalid. For example, the user enters something like 12:60 a.m., which does not exist, or 13 p.m., which does not exist as well. And do not assume that someone's hours will start at a.m. and end at p.m. Someone might work late and even long hours, that's 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. And also, structure working.py as follows, with a main function, a function convert, and we can import ROE and sys. But in this exercise, I'm only going to use ROE. And at the end of the code, call the function main. And either before or after implementing convert in working.py, additionally implement a file called test_working.py with 3 or more functions to test our function convert, and then run pytest of test_working.py. And we've been given quite a few hints here, but these hints just look similar to what we've seen before. That we can use the search module or the search function in the ROE module, and also to record that regular expressions support quite a few special characters which we've seen before, talking about the backslash here and all of these, pretty much the same things we've been seeing. But this is the only hint here that's a little bit different, but then we've seen this before in a previous exercise. And this just tells us that If we want to format an integer with a leading 0, we can do so with code like this. Print as an string in curly braces n colon 02, wherein if n is a single digit, it will be prefixed with a 0. And if you scroll through to look at this demo, in this case, we see when the code is run, the user entered 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and this is a correct format, and the output was 0900 to 1700, which is what we expect. This time around, the code was run with 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. without the zeros, the colon and zeros, and we still had it in the correct output format from 9 to 17, and ran again the third time from 9 to 5:30, and the result was 9 to 17:30. And as usual, we are expected to create a folder, we call it working, seed into that directory and create the files working.py and test_working.py. And at the end of our code, before submitting, we are expected to test our files working.py and test_working.py. Run it quite a number of times. You can use a sample inputs from here, making sure that the code returns the expected output or raises the expected error, which is a value error, and also checking or rather testing test_working.py, making sure that it's able to catch any errors in our code. And to do that, we're going to run it a number of times. The first time we'll run pytest on test_working.py, making sure that everything is correct. Then we're going to modify our function convert, introduce a few bugs to it, then run pytest one more time and see if we're able to catch these errors. Then correct the errors, ensure that everything is correct before submitting the exercise. So with this, I want to believe the exercise a little bit clearer, and we're just going to go ahead and start writing the code. And this is what our file working.py should look like. We'll have our module ROE, we'll have the main function, and we have the function convert, and at the end of it, we'll call the function main. I have added a few comments to this function convert here, but don't bother about it. It's just to help us in writing the function convert because it's going to be a little bit long. So I decided to break it down into smaller sections, but don't bother about it. Everything is going to be clear soon enough. But before we implement the function convert, I prepared a little Jupyter notebook for us to give us an idea of what we're going to be doing. So the first thing we need to do here is to import our module ROE. So I'm going to run this code cell with Shift Enter. And now in this other code cell, I created a number of variables to save some sample inputs from the user, valid inputs. Like the first one, we have time 1 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And these other times, I just copied all of these from the website. But this one I just modified a little bit because we remember that according to the exercise, the time could start either with AM or with PM. So the user could start working probably in the morning to night, or maybe start in the night and then end in the morning. So this last example is to check that. And so the user is working from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m., something a little bit different. And we're going to use these sample inputs to generate our pattern. So I'll also go ahead and run this code cell. And now we're going to go ahead and write down our pattern. So what do we need to do, or rather, how do we start with this pattern? We're going to look at this sample input and try to figure something out. So the first thing we need to realize from this sample is that a valid input needs to start with a number. So using the caret symbol and in parentheses, because we need to capture this value, we need to specify a range of values. And we can do that with square brackets from 0 to 9. And so this pattern so far is going to match any digit from 0 to 9. But then looking at this, we know that this value could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 9, and it could also be 10, 11, and 12. But this pattern here is only going to match one number. So beside these square brackets, we need to specify in curly braces that we are expecting 1 or 2 repetitions of a number, because we know that this could be 1, it could be 2, as well as it could be 10, 11, or 12. And after this value, what we have next is a colon. So I'm going to move out of this parenthesis and I'm going to include a literal colon because we know this is not a special character. But then we see that this colon could or could not be present. So beside the colon, I'm going to put a question mark to show that this could be there or it could not be there. And after the colon, we have two values. In this case, it's just 00, but we know that this could be like 9:30 or 9:20 or 9:45. But one thing we are sure of is that we're expecting two more values, and that we need to capture these values. So in parentheses, I'm going to use our same range we used before from 0 to 9, and out of these square brackets, I'm going to use curly braces to specify that we want two repetitions of a number. And outside of this, I'm going to put a question mark to indicate that these two numbers could be present as well as they could be absent. And after these two numbers, we have a literal space, so I'm going to leave a space here. And then we see this AM here, but we know that this could be AM or PM. So still in parentheses, I'm going to put AM or PM. And after this, we have a literal space, and we have the words to, which match this to right here. And then we have another space for to match this space right here. And after that, we have another number or colon, two numbers, a space, and a PM, which looks very similar to what we had just here, which means that we could actually use this same pattern here to match the second part of a valid input. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it right here with the addition of one more symbol, the dollar sign, to indicate that this is what the end of a valid input should look like. And I know this looks a little bit long, but let's run through it one more time to make sure that we've done everything correctly. So we've put a caret sign here to show that this is what the start should look like. We are matching a number, one or two repetitions of a number specifically. We have a colon with this question mark here indicating that this could or could not be present. And in parentheses, because we want to capture all of this, we have another number, two repetitions, of a number, which could or could not be present. We have a space, we have AM or PM, which we're also capturing, reason why we're putting in parentheses. We have another space, two, to match this to right here, another space. We have a number, one or two repetitions of a number, like we see here, a colon, which could or could not be present, reason why we're putting the question mark. And in another set of parentheses, we have two repetitions of a number, which could or could not be present. As we see here, it's present, and here it's not present, a space, and we have AM or PM, which we're also capturing because we still need this at the end. And the dollar sign here to indicate that this should end either with AM or with PM, as we see with these valid inputs. So I'm going to run this code cell, and I'm going to run this next one in which we're trying to get a match. And now if I run match.groups, we should be able to see any matches that were found. And with this output, we can already tell that our pattern looks just right. We have 9:00 AM, 5:00 PM, which were obtained from this input, 9:00 AM, 5:00 PM, which are the portions in the user's input that actually matter to us, because we need to use this to generate the output. And permit me to run this one more time, but this time around we're going to change this variable and we're going to use time 2. If I press shift enter here and I run this other code cell as well, we see that we have 9, none, AM, 5, none, and PM. So why is this? If we look back at our pattern and look at this time, we see that we are capturing all of these values. We're trying to capture the 9, which we got it. Also, we specify that we're trying to capture two repetitions of a value which could or could not be present. And in this case, the value is not present. And so if the value is not present, then the code returned none. We're able to capture the AM, capture the 5, and then since there's nothing after this 5 and before PM, we have another none, and then we have PM. So at the end of the day, whether all the components of a valid format are present or not, we're going to have a tuple with 6 values, which could be actual values or none. And next, in this other code cell, I'm trying to unpack this tuple and then print the values individually. So if I run shift enter here, we have 9, none, AM, 5, none, and PM. So we see that we can create separate variables to contain all of these values. and I call this variable start hour, start minute, and start period to match this 9, a minute that could or could not be present, and the period, in this case AM, and then end hour, end minute, and end period to match this other 5, the end minute and the end period. And this should help us to complete the first part of this exercise, that's being able to obtain the matches. However, there's still a lot more to do because after we have this match, we need to convert this time from a 12-hour format to a 24-hour format. And it's going to require a little bit more of coding, but no worries, we're going to go through it step by step. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this pattern since we already have it here, and I'm going to paste it in our file working.py to give us a head start. So looking at this function convert, the first thing we need to do is to create our pattern and then check to see if we have a match. So right about here, I'm going to paste the line of code we just copied, and so this is what our pattern should look like. And next, I'm going to create a variable or call this variable match, and in this variable, I want to save the result of arrow8.search on pattern run on the user's input, which is passed as a parameter in the function convert. And with these 2 lines of code, we are able to create a pattern and check to see if we have a match. Next, if a match exists, we want to unpack the tuple like we saw earlier, creating separate variables for each value which is important to us. But if there's no match, raise a value error. And I'm going to do this with a single if statement. I'm going to say if not match, that's to say if we do not have a match, we want to raise a value error. But however, if we do have a match, we want to create these variables. The first I'm going to call start hour. The second I'll call start underscore minute. Next, start underscore, let me correct this, start underscore period. The next, end underscore hour. The next, end underscore minute. Let me correct this, minute. And the last one, end underscore period. Period. And I'll assign these variables to match.groups with an S, open and close parenthesis. And like we saw before, this is going to unpack the content of match.groups, which is a tuple containing all the variables or all the values which are important to us. And this settles it for this section where we are checking if a match exists. If so, we are going to unpack the tuple, but if there's no match, we'll raise a value error. Next, we want to convert any stars to integers and nonce to 0. Because remember that if we come back here and looking at the result from our unpacking right here, all of these values, 9, 5, AM, PM, they are still strings, and so we need to convert at least the 9 and the 5 to integers. AM and PM could remain as stars. And in these cases where we had none here and here, because the input the user passed was 9 AM to 5 PM without the minutes, we know that if the user does this, in other words, what they're trying to say is that this is 900 and this is 500. They just chose to omit it, and it's common knowledge to everyone. So coming back to this file working.py, what we want to do is convert any stars like 9 and 5 to integers, and in a case where there are no minutes, which are represented by these nonce, we want to return 0. So to do this is pretty easy. All we need to do is to modify these variables, start hour and let's say what, end hour, and I'm going to set start hour and end hour to the int of start hour and to the int of end hour as well. So int end hour. But with the minutes, it's going to be a little bit different because we know that these minutes could be present, and if so, we need to convert the stars to integers, and or they could be absent, and in that case, we need to convert nonce or any none to a 0. And this will look like, let me say start underscore minute will be equal to the int of start underscore minute if start underscore minute actually exists, else 0. So this is a little bit compact, but all we are doing here is we're setting start minute to the int of start minute if start minute does exist. That's if it's not none. Else we want to convert it to 0. And I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. And I'm going to modify this variable name. We don't want to modify start minute. We want to deal with end minute right here. I'm going to remove this start here as well, and I'm going to put end minute, and here the very same thing, end minute. So if end minute exists, we're going to convert it to an integer. But if it does not exist, and in case we have none, we're going to convert it to 0. And this should do to convert any stars to integers and any nonce to zeros. And the next thing we need to do is to check that the hour and minute values are valid. We know that the valid hours should be from 1 to 12 and the valid minutes should be from 0 to 60, or rather 0 to 59. So we're going to use an if statement to make sure that that is accurate. And if that's not the case, we need to raise a value error. And this will look like if not, in parentheses, 0 is less than or equal to our start minute, or not hour, minute, because you know that the minute lies between 0 and 60, less than 60. So if start minute is not between 0 and 60, and 0 less than or equal to end minute as well, end minute less than 60, want to raise a value error. So raise value error. So what is this checking? If start minute is not between 0 and 60 and end minute not between 0 and 60, what are we going to do? We'll raise a value error. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here as well, right about here. And I'm going to modify these values because this time around we want to deal with the hours. We know that the hours should lie between 1 and not 0, and instead of 60 they should lie between 1 to 12, and this could be less than or equal to 60, so I need to put the equal to sign here, and I'll do the same thing here. I'll remove this one, or rather remove this 0 and put a 1. Here I'll put an equal to sign, and here instead of 60 this should be 12, and this should not be start minute but this should be start hour. Sorry about this, but let me just modify this like that, and this should be hour as well. And so this other if statement is checking that our hour lies between 1 and 12. That's for the start hour and the end hour. And if that's not the case, we're going to raise a value error. And so with these lines of code, we are sure that our hour and minute are valid. If they are not valid, we raise value errors. And the next thing we need to do is to convert our start time to the 24-hour format. This might look a little bit off, but no worries, I'm going to explain it as I go ahead. The first thing we need to keep in mind is that the start period for the start time could either be AM or PM. So we're going to use these start periods to convert our time from the 12-hour format to the 24-hour format. So the first thing is, if we have a start period which is in the AM, that's if start period is equal to AM, that's for the morning period. We know that in the morning, that is for the AM, the time in the 12-hour format matches the time in the 24-hour format. That's 1 AM is the same as 1 in the 24-hour format, 2 AM is the same as 2, and all the likes. The only difference is that 12 AM is not equal to 12 in the 24-hour format, but it's instead equal to 0. So if the start hour is equal to 12, what we want to do is to convert the start hour to 0. And the rest are going to match perfectly. 1 AM for 1, 2 AM for 2, and all the rest. But if the start period is in PM, we know that the times don't match because 1 PM is equal to 13. And remember that what we needed to do was just to add 12 to the time in the 12-hour format to give us the time in the 24-hour format. So outside of this if statement, I'm going to put an else block. So if we're not working with AM, but we're instead working with PM, if the start hour is not equal to 12, we want to add 12 to the start hour. So start hour plus equal to 12. So what does this mean? If the time starts with PM, if it is 12 PM, we're going to leave it as it is. But if it's not 12 PM, we're going to add 12 to all of the values of start hour. So if it is 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., anyone, we're going to add 12 to it, making sure that 1 p.m. becomes 1 plus 12, which is 13, 2 p.m. becomes 2 plus 12, which is 14, and so on and so forth. And this should do to convert the start time to the 24-hour format. And after this, what we need to do is to convert the end time to the 24-hour format as well. The code is going to look pretty much like what we just did here. So I'm going to copy all of this and I'm going to paste it here. However, we're going to have to modify it a little bit. The only difference being that instead of start period, start hour, and start hour here, we're going to do with end period and end hour. And this is what this section of the code should look like. So looking at this, what are we saying? If the end period is equal to AM, so the user probably worked from, let's say, 5 p.m. to maybe 9 a.m. in the morning. What we need to check is if the hour is equal to 12, we need to convert it to 0 because we know that 12 a.m. is equal to 0 in the 24-hour format, but the rest of it remains unchanged. But if it is not AM, but we're doing with PM, then we need to add 12 to all of the N hours for the N hour to match the 24-hour format. And with this done, we are certain that our time has been converted from the 12-hour format to the 24-hour format. And what we need to do now is just to return the output in the expected format. So in this line of code, I'm going to remove this. We're going to return as an F string or open curly braces here. The first thing we need to put is start hour. Remember the format to add a leading 0 to it in case it's necessary with a 02 here. We'll have a colon. Then we have in another set of curly braces the start minute. Remember the format 0 to a space 2 another space, and in another set of curly braces we have our end hour in the format 02. Outside of this we have a colon, and in the last set of curly braces we have the end minute in the expected format with a 02 to add a leading 0 to it in case it's necessary. And I think this should do for our file working.py. I'm going to save this or open up my terminal and we're going to test this together before implementing our test in test_working.py. So I'm going to run python of working.py. I press enter. We've been asked to enter our hours. Let me come here and let's say we copy this input here. I don't want to type all of it. Let me come here and paste it. And as expected, we have our output from 9 to 17. Let me run this again and press enter. And this time around, let's use this other input here, copy, and I'm going to paste it right here. Now press enter and we have from 12 to 17. That's 12 p.m. to 5 p.m., 12 to 17. And I'm going to run this just one more time and just enter anything here. When I press enter, we have a result value error. So with this, I think our file working.py is working just fine. I'm going to clear all of this or close this terminal. And now we are going to implement the file test_working.py. And as you can see, I've already gone ahead and imported pytest and imported convert from our file working. So what we need to do here now is just create functions to test our function convert. And I'm going to propose 3 functions. In the first, I'm going to enter a number of valid times and ensure that the output is what we expect. In the second, I'm going to enter a number of invalid formats to ensure that pytest is able to catch that. And in the last one, I'm going to enter a number of invalid times and see the way our code behaves. So this first function, I'm going to call test_valid_times with 0 parameters. And in this function, I want to assert that convert of let's say from 9:00 a.m. to let's say 5:00 p.m. I think that's the way it's supposed to look like, will be equal to, in quotes, 09:00 space 2 another space 17:00. And I can copy and paste this a number of times to check numerous inputs. Like for example, in this case, let me remove this colon and 00, and let's say from 9 to 5 p.m. like this, it should return this. In this other case, let me remove the 00 and the colon from here. I'm going to leave it here. And in this last case, let's say we do from, let's say what, from 12 a.m. or rather, let's say 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Let's say what, 5 a.m. and see what gives. And so this should be from 12. So let me remove this. And here it should be from 12 to 5. So 0, 5 here. And I'm going to leave it like this for this function test underscore valid times. And next, I'm going to create my second function. This one I'm going to call test underscore invalid underscore formats, where I'm going to enter a number of wrong formats with no parameters. And remember that our code raises a value error in case the format is wrong. And to check this with PyTest, we're not going to use assert like usual. It's a little bit different. What we need to type is with PyTest dot raises, and in parentheses we need to enter the kind of error we are expecting. In this case, a value error. We are going to check convert of, let's enter something invalid. We're going to say 9 or colon 00. I'm going to attach the AM to the 9. So in this case, I'm not putting the space. 2, something wrong again. Let's say what, 5 colon 00 PM. And this is one way that the user could enter this thing completely wrong. Let's copy this, and we're going to paste it a number of times to verify different ways that the user could enter this thing completely wrong. So I'll paste it here, and I'm going to paste it here again as well, Control V, and I'll paste it one more time here with another Control V. And this time, let's modify this, and let's see in which other way could the user run this thing wrong. Let's say we remove this AM here, and we will remove this PM here. And let's put these two in its right format. We're going to remove it from uppercase and leave it in lowercase. We know that these two should raise a value error. In this other case, instead of saying 2, let's say the user put like a dash. And let's put a space here and the other space here, which means from 9 a.m. dash 5 p.m. And this last example, let's say the user entered AM in lowercase, because remember, we're expected to assume that the AM and PM should be in uppercase only. So let's put that like this, and let's put these 2 as it's supposed to be, and these 2 should raise another value error. And I think this is good enough to test the invalid formats. You can go ahead and write as many tests as you want. Let me copy this, and I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to modify this to test invalid times. So I'm going to call this function test underscore invalid underscore times instead of formats. And I want to raise a value error in case the user enters a time like, instead of 9 here, let's enter something wrong, 13 a.m. Let me remove this here, put another space here, from 13 a.m. to 5 p.m. So every other thing is correct aside this 13, because the user's time cannot start with 13. This other time, let's leave it as 9, and then here, let's say from 9 to 55. Let's put the AMs and the PMs as expected. So this will be PM here, and here we'll have AM. So we're checking the time from 9 a.m. to 55 p.m., which is outrageously wrong. And here, instead of modifying the time in the hours, let's put some wrong minutes and see what happens. So here I'm going to put back these 2, so everything looks right. And so instead of checking from 9 to 5 p.m., I'm going to check from 9 to, let's say what, 5:60. And I think we can remove this other last check. It's not so necessary. We've already inputted wrong hours and wrong minutes. So I'm going to save this, and I think we've written just enough tests to check our function convert. So I'm going to open up my terminal, and this time around, instead of running Python, we're going to run pytest of test underscore working.py, and when I press enter, we have 3 tests passed in 0.1 seconds. And this tells us that our function convert is working just fine. Now we can go back and let's say like introduce a number of bugs in this thing and see what happens. There are a number of ways that this could go wrong. A lot of things that we could include, like for example, let's say in our pattern, we went ahead and added the flag roe.ignore case, which would mean that this will accept AM and PM in uppercase or in lowercase. Let's try that and see what happens. Let's see roe.ignore case. I'm going to save this and let's run pytest one more time. And we have one field and two paths like we expected. Now let's see if we can scroll through this output and see where things went wrong. So from here we can already tell that test underscore invalid underscore formats field. So let's come back here and see what we have in that function, test underscore invalid formats. Already I can tell that the problem came from here, but let's scroll through this and see if pytest is going to tell us that. And just right here, we see that though we have a number of checks in our function invalid formats, pytest is able to tell us the exact one that failed. Because as you can see, this first one actually raised a value error. This second one did raise a value error. This third one as well, but this one didn't. The reason why it says did not raise a value error. And looking at the last check, we're trying to verify that 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. will raise a value error. But we know that this is not going to happen because we just added roe.ignore case right here. But the fix for this is very easy. All we need to do is to remove this, save this file again, and run our pytest one more time. Pytest of test underscore working.py, and we are back to having everything correct. So I want to believe this is good enough for this exercise, but then feel free to modify your file working.py, change that convert function a little bit, introduce more bugs to it, see the way pytest reacts, and then try to use pytest to figure out where the errors are found and then correct them. And when you're done with that, I think that will help you get a better understanding of the way this thing works. However, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below and I'll be more than pleased to answer you. If you did enjoy the video, do well to hit the like and subscribe button so as to support the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in my upcoming videos. That said, have a good day.